Have you ever wondered what it would be like to triple your income and get gracefully divorced and double the number of locations of your business, all while dealing with the fact that you have a baby with cancer? You're about to meet a real live leader and gift to humanity, Nick Passalacqua. Nick Passalacqua is a trial lawyer who, to me, radiates courage. This episode is brought to you by the Podcast Services Division at Life's Tough Media. Having your own podcast and using your voice to deliver your message allows you to creatively reach all types of audiences, from clients to prospects to your most loyal membership base. Life's Tough Media makes having a podcast easier than ever before by offering robust, turnkey podcast solutions with superior remote recording capabilities and with studio affiliates located around the world. Contact us today for a no-obligation consultation at info@lifestuff.com or visit us at lifestuff.com to learn more. So what is a breakthrough? It's finding your way out of suffering and stuck. It's that feeling of new energy, renewed life, and excitement. When I was 7 months pregnant with my second baby, I received a life-changing diagnosis. I had cancer. When I told my older daughter, she said, "So you're going to die?" And the only thing that saved my life during that time was knowing how to emotionally break through. Welcome to the Tougher Together Breakthrough Podcast. I'm your host, Rebeccah Silence. I'm a speaker, coach, and the creator of Healing is Possible. In each episode, I prepare you for life no matter what challenges you're facing. I'm going to invite you into the stories of real people who are living life in breakthrough and making the world a better place. If they can do it, so can you. Breakthrough is your right. Get ready to break through. Get ready for the rest of your life. Nick, welcome to the Tougher Together Breakthrough Podcast with me, host Rebeccah Silence.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for living how you live and leading how you lead. Who are you?
That's kind of a loaded question, I guess. No, but again, I'm Nick Passalacqua. We operate a law firm here in Central New York. Dad of three, former college athlete, real estate investor, and somebody who doesn't really have an off switch.
Yeah. And to me, that's a sign of breakthrough. I mean, you're literally living life exactly how you dreamed that you could.
Yeah, or at least on the way there and closer every day, right?
Tell us more. What does that mean?
For better or for worse, I guess I'm a person that's rarely satisfied. I always just have that itch, that urge, that feeling that there's more to be achieved, even with, even with the level of satisfaction or comfort within your own skin. There's always growth to be had and development to be made.
Why are you so committed to growth when it would be so easy to be comfortable?
Again, I'm never happy with the status quo. Like once I've achieved it, like great. And we have a saying around the office, like the status quo of today is no longer acceptable tomorrow.
And where did that come from?
I don't know. I just kind of came up with that to kind of instill, as we grew the staff, this feeling of that's great, but whatever we've done tomorrow, there's no reason we can't at least attempt to surpass it tomorrow.
Yeah. And the next day, the next day, and the next day.
Right. So, exactly.
Tell us about life before breakthrough, and then tell us about breakthrough and what it means to you and what you've learned.
Yeah. Life before a breakthrough of any kind, I think, is stressful, and for me, that's the telltale sign when any type of growth or breakthrough needs to occur. because like I'm someone who does not stress typically. And it's a frustration for some people around me and in my life that they can't understand why I don't stress about most things, like at all. I mean, like, I'm like, nope, whatever. Because, you know, and my response to them is always like, what is stressing about that going to do for me? Right? Is the stress, you know, is increasing my stress level going to help solve the problem? Right? Or provide me with some kind of solution? Or is it just going to cause me to drive myself nuts? Right? And like with things like that, I'm a very utilitarian type of approach. Like, what is it going to do for me? If it's going to do nothing for me, I'm not going to do it. And that's kind of how I approach stress. And if it serves me no good, I just don't allow it to happen. You know, I'm like, why? What worrying about it is going to do nothing for me. So I don't bother worrying about it. I mean, obviously, that's not always the case. You know, as things level up and stress levels level up, right? It's inevitable. But for me, I've come to learn, I didn't always have this awareness, but I've come to recognize the increased anxiety and stress levels, meaning something's happening or not happening that should or shouldn't be that you need to address. So stop putting it off and procrastinating, or this feeling is going to get worse. Certainly isn't going to get any better.
Yeah. And paint the picture of life before breakthrough. How were you living?
Stressfully, right? I mean, everything I did was, I was questioning it myself, right? I mean, and it transcends all aspects of your life. If you are needing a significant growth or breakthrough in one area, if you try to convince yourself that, well, it's just in that area, everything else is okay, you're full of it and you're fooling yourself, because that absolutely will permeate through you into everything you do. Right. So I was, you know, my marriage had trouble for a bit, you know, before we went our separate ways. And I wore a lot of that on my shoulders. Right. And I'm a yes man. I like to please people. And that became an issue. Right. And, you know, being made to feel that I was picking certain things or activities over my family when it wasn't the case. I mean, I'm a very social person too, right? You know, I got torn with who do I appease, right? Myself, my business, my spouse, right? My employees, like, and it became this huge internal tug of war, right? So certain time would come, like 5:15, 5:30, and I'd be getting messages like, "You coming home? Coming home yet? These kids have been a handful. When you coming home? When you coming home?" So I'd feel guilty, like, yeah, I should get home and help with the kids, knowing I had a list of things to do at work, right? But then I'd go home and I wouldn't be as present with the kids because I'd be thinking in my head, oh my God, I got this to do. I got this to do. I got this to do. Tomorrow's going to be a nightmare. I've got to catch up on all this stuff. And I'd be worrying about the things I should have been doing at work. So that no matter where I was pulled, right, in what seemingly was opposite directions, right? Like if you're at work, you're not spending time with the family like you should be, right? If you're with the family, you're not spending time at work like you should be to build it and grow it and do the things you want to do, right? And so it was one of these vicious cycles because my family life wasn't what I wanted it to be. I was frustrated and distracted. My work life wasn't what I wanted to be because it was and it wasn't. We were still growing and things, but I kept thinking to myself, where could I be if I could invest the time and dedication and attention that I want to without being guilted into feeling as though I'm neglecting my family in exchange. Right. So it was a constant internal tug of war. Right. And mix in me being a very social person with a spouse who became less and less social, you know, and then there's a tug of war there. right? Within my own personality. Well, I would like to go socialize, but she doesn't want to. So what do? Right? Do I appease her? Do I appease me? Right? And have some kind of a release or reward for the hard work I'm putting in, things like that. You know, so it was a constant internal and sometimes external battle and dialogue.
I love what you brought up about what I call compartmentalization. There is no, oh, this area of my life is the problem, and this area of my life is working. How we show up is how we show up. So now, can you paint the picture for us of the breakthrough moment that had this, you're pulled in multiple directions, living for everybody but yourself, shift and change?
Yeah. So it got to a point where I was in this vicious cycle, right? I would work, I would go home, I would go to bed, I would go round and round we go with no real, you know, the affection in our relationship had fallen off for a number of different reasons. And I own all of my own parts in that. But I sought out rescue, right? You've talked about a rescue energy, right? And I sought that out. And for me, being a social person, it was just like going and hanging out, and oftentimes that would lead me to a bar, right? Or just socializing, right? And then, you know, that dialogue would come in and say, "Where are you? What are you doing?" You know, and that deteriorated some of the marital trust, right? But nothing else changed, right? Trying to include my spouse in social events and outings or just date nights with no avail. But I knew it came to a point where I realized I couldn't keep doing what I was doing for myself, right? For myself, for my kids, for my health, for my business, and for my marriage, right? So, you know, it was a constant battle within myself to figure out how to pull myself out of that habit, because there wasn't anything comparable. You know, you study habits and how to break a bad habit and implement a new habit or routine, right? A lot of times they'll tell you, in order to break a bad habit, it's most effective if you find a new habit that's better to replace it, right? Rather than going cold turkey and then you're kind of longing for that habit or wondering what if, or getting bored and you fall into that trap, right? And for me, there was nothing that I could fill that in with, because no matter what I tried to fill it in with, activities, time, attention, other than my family, I was made to feel like, how dare you? Anything ever comes up, you choose that over us. Which was like this baffling juxtaposition to how I felt about it, right? My thought was, well, no, I'm doing these things so I don't do those other things that nobody likes, right? I'm bettering myself. I'm doing this, doing that, you know, and it got to a point where it became clear that there was one major roadblock, unfortunately, and that was my relationship.
And so, what was the breakthrough that had you willing to be courageous and begin the process of leading your life in a new direction?
It was an ongoing dialogue for a long time. I don't know. I mean, obviously there was something that switched at some point. And you know, I had been on a personal development journey for a number of years. And, you know, my spouse at the time kind of had not. She tried and kind of jumped ship. But anytime any drama within the relationship came up, it was always this: you broke this, you fix it, you do it. Yeah, I want to fix us, you do it. You know, I mean, hell, when we engaged with you, February of 17, maybe fall of 16, something like that. It was an ultimatum from her. It was, you fix this. You broke this. I'm giving you 3 months to fix this or I'm out. You know, and we went through it, right? And during that time, we found out we were pregnant with our third child. You know, and when she was 7 weeks old, diagnosed with cancer, right? Stage 4 high risk neuroblastoma. So whatever BS we had going on went about as far to the back row as you can possibly imagine, of course, right? Nothing else was an issue. That was it, obviously. You know, as a parent, you put the blinders on, and you go through that, man. Nothing else mattered. You know, our 4,000 square foot house over here didn't matter. You know, my big Mercedes didn't mean shit. You know, it was about managing the other 2 kids, trying to manage a business, which, man, at that point, that was mid-November of 2017. I had just hired my first employee in February of that year, my first attorney underneath me in July of that year, and then in October, our second assistant. And then the first one had just quit shortly before that. So I had 1 attorney and 1 secretary working for me. That was it. You know, and I was, my wife at the time lived in the hospital with our daughter for about 45 days. I would work till I could leave, which sometimes was 1 o'clock in the afternoon, sometimes it was 3:30 in the afternoon, sometimes 4 o'clock. If I had the time, I'd stop home and change. I would run out to the hospital in Syracuse, which is an hour from where we were living, so that my wife at the time could shower, sleep, you know, go down to get some food or what have you, and leave the room. And I would sit with the baby until 1, 2 in the morning. I'd drive home, get home at 2, 3 in the morning, sleep for a couple of hours, get up and do it all over again for 45 days while trying to juggle the other 2 kids that were between my in-laws and my parents. You know, that all of a sudden mom and dad are not around much, you know, kind of like at the drop of a dime. And so that brought up a whole different world of stressors, right? Like I'd never experienced, of course. You know, and it wasn't like, oh, I got bills. Oh, I got, you know, everybody's got those, and I'm not downplaying them. But all of a sudden, something like this happens, and those, I mean, it's like, take my car. I don't give a shit. Foreclose on my house, right? Like, and luckily, business kept going and growing through that. But, you know, I've said to people before, like, it was, if it wasn't for me having the drive starting, you know, the end of 16 into the beginning of 17 to start changing the path of the business and start really pushing the growth of the business, I would have been shut down. I would have been out of work. I would have been damn near bankrupt. I would have been looking for a job as soon as my daughter was released from the hospital, because I would have been belly up, you know. So, you know, and through that, in hindsight, you know, it exposed some additional relationship differences and dynamics in the mentality and the approach to that. You know, but then once, thank God, my daughter's doing great now. And once we were out of that, for the most part, you know, which was like a 2.5 year process between all the various treatments, then we started settling back into a somewhat normal routine. And sure enough, all that stuff that went way back here to the back seat starts creeping up towards the front again. Right? And it's all the same stuff. It never got addressed. It never got remedied. It never got resolved. It was just there way back in the background because we had more important problems at the time. You know, so a lot of the same stuff started coming up, you know, pushing me in that same direction of doing things I didn't want to do. I wanted to do it, so I did it, right? I don't want to say I didn't want to do it, but I knew it wasn't healthy for me, right? Or for my relationships, but I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know, at the time, I didn't know a better rescue. I didn't know a better escape or respite from what I was experiencing. And then I just, again, continuing on my self-development throughout that whole process with audiobooks and seminars and YouTube and working with you. And, it just became abundantly clear that neither my wife at the time nor myself had any idea what happiness looked like.
Okay, so this is a breakthrough moment.
Right. Love her to death, still care about her. It's very amicable. And luckily for us, like I said, there was nothing scandalous that ever happened that led to the split. It was just kind of one of those things that I think we both realized it was time. She kind of brought it up, said, I think we should look at going our separate ways. And, in some variation of that. And for, I don't know how long before that, she had built that up before. And I was always the one, kind of groveling, saying, whoa, let's make this work. We'll figure this out. It's, and it was never like any particular one thing. It was the totality of my conduct, her inability to kind of relate to everything I was going through, right? From a financial stressors standpoint. And, I didn't always feel very comfortable and open talking shop at home, like coming home and venting about my day. It was always kind of a one-up thing. Like, oh, you think you had a bad day? Let me tell you about mine. I'm like, well, listen, me saying I had a rough day in no way takes away from if you had a rough day, right? We're both entitled to bad days. Sometimes they'll happen on the same day. Just because I'm saying I had a rough day is not in any way suggesting that you didn't or couldn't, So I just repressed a lot of that stuff, which again caused me to look for an outlet to hang out with people time to time that I could vent and talk to that stuff about. But, I was always the one saying, well, okay, I'll fix it. Okay, I'll do this. I'll do that, and, funny story, if I can digress for a second, when given that ultimatum and I found you, I'll be honest, my whole thing was, okay, let me find a woman who's all about women's rights and we'll come in and we'll patronize her and tell her what she wants to hear. I'll take the licking. I've been taking it. I can do it. It's no problem. Let's get her, somebody say, you're right, Kara. You're right. You're right. What a jerk he's been. What an idiot. Right. And I'm like, I'm ready for that. Right. And we came into the first session and let her, open up about everything. The first thing you did was thank me for not interrupting her. And then you turned to her and said, Nick is not responsible for your happiness or unhappiness. And I was like, uh-oh. This is not exactly going as planned. Right? But, ultimately, and she was totally set off by it. She was like, wait, what? Because I think she anticipated what I anticipated. You hearing her side of the story and saying, yeah, Nick, you're an asshole. Mm-hmm. What are you doing? What are you doing? Get your head out of your ass. Mm-hmm. Right? Because I partially felt that way myself. I had been trained to believe that, and it was not only like, uh-oh, but like over the sessions and what have you, it became more like, yeah, this makes sense. I can't I can't derive 100% of my happiness based on someone else's existence.
Right.
Right. And when, and I was trying to be that for her, and starting to realize that in working on myself was when I said, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen here. And I wanted her, as much as I wanted myself to be happy and find happiness, I wanted that for her. You know what I mean? She was she's just as deserving as anybody else and myself. You know, it was never about, well, I want this, I don't care about you. I care about her to this day. And I wanted that for her too. It was selfishly motivated, no doubt. Like, you know, I wasn't willing to stay in that relationship for a multitude of reasons. But I didn't want her to feel trapped in that type of relationship either. You know, it wasn't fair to either one of us. You know, and I told her this when we were discussing it. I said, you know, I've always been the one fighting to keep this together. I said, why do I want to fight to stay in this? This isn't a relationship either one of us really want to be in, not this type of relationship. You know, I said, neither one of us knows what happiness looks like right now. I said that exact phrase to her. I said, we don't. We wouldn't know it if it hit us in the face at that point. You know, and so that was kind of the moment I started trending and feeling okay with that idea of moving on in that way.
Yeah, I remember divorce almost being like the worst case scenario in your brain.
It terrified me. It absolutely terrified me.
Keep going.
I mean, looking back, like before everything with my daughter and stuff, you named the reason for the fear, and that went through my head. The stigma of the divorce, just I hate failing at anything, right? And to me, it was a failure, right? Like I played multiple sports growing up, played very competitive international travel soccer when I was growing up, played Division I football in college, still played, recreational indoor soccer and pickup leagues, this and that, up until COVID shut everything down and everything. And I've always been extremely competitive, and I've always been a horrible loser. I'll be the first to admit that. I've always been a sore loser, right? Like, oh my God, I've run into people that I used to play soccer with, like when I was 13, 14, 15, and they'll still talk about my temper. Because literally that was the MO I had. I was like the hot-headed little jerk off who couldn't stand to lose. And so it was just kind of in me. And I felt that anything but powering through, making it work, was a failure. Right? And that wasn't me. That's not Nick Passalacqua. I don't fail. I don't fail at things. Right? But what I've come to understand was that staying in that was a failure for any longer. Right? That was doing myself a disservice, and her and our kids. Right? So many people said when we were going through it and pursuing it, and I moved out, they said, oh, I hope you're thinking about the kids. Hope you're thinking about the kids. I can't tell you how many times I heard that. And my response was the same to anybody who said that. And I said, you're right. But you tell me what's better for the kids. For them to have two parents that are together in the same house, they're miserable, constantly bickering, there's no affection shown between them, especially in front of the kids or anything else, right? They're not having fun at home. And that's what the kids see day to day. And that's what the kids grow up thinking is a healthy relationship. Or is it better for the kids to have parents that live separate and apart, but the kids see their parents living their best lives, being happy, pursuing things that they want to pursue, doing things they want to do, and constantly having a smile on their face and being engaged with the kids when they're there? What do you think is better for the kids? And I told myself that, but when I'm still moving out, this is still new to me, right? And I'm going, yeah, that's a great fucking Hallmark card, right? Like that's great. That's great in theory, right? And then doing it, I started realizing, because one of my biggest fears was the kids. It was not seeing them. And that was probably the biggest fear that held me back from doing it sooner, right? because nothing kept, it was cyclical with my ex-wife. It was what it was. I knew what to expect. I knew, I didn't like it, but I knew what to expect. But the unknown of not seeing the kids, right, for me was a shock to my conscience. The thought of like, what do you mean I'll go home and I won't see the kids for 2 days? Or, that was the biggest fear for me. And, I started thinking more deeply about it, right? And as I moved out and started experiencing it, my thoughts were accurate in that staying in the relationship I was in, being able to see the kids constantly or what have you, was not what I wanted my relationship with my kids to be. Because I'd come home, right? It would be the, oh man, tough day. Oh, do I talk about it because it's going to get shot down or one-upped or whatever? And then there's that frustration and whatever else. And then so I sit on the couch and I'm like, you got one kid here, one kid over there, one kid in the other room, but your spouse is in the other room. So you're good, right? So you're never really as present. I was never really as present as nowhere near what I am now, right? Because you always have that assistance. And I think that we take that for granted. I definitely took that for granted when I had a spouse at home that I knew, the little one goes running in the other room. Well, I know my spouse is over there. They'll get her, right? It was like I was less engaged with the kids, no doubt, right? Now it's me, and it's an absolute rat race some days, right? I check out of here. And I go home and I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off, until I can settle them down and we can cuddle and watch a movie or read a book or what have you. But it's me, right? When they're there with me, they know it's me. I'm the one bathing. I'm the one feeding. I'm the one cleaning. I'm the one picking the movie or helping them pick a book, right? Tucking them in. All this stuff that, I was doing those things, not with as much regularity, right? Because your spouse might do the bath this time or what have you. But so I have less time with my kids on a clock, but the time that I do have with them is so much better time, and meaningful for me and, hopefully for them that they'll realize, so.
Nick, those kids are so lucky to have you. Your ex-wife, so lucky to have you. What have you learned about happiness, and how has the process of being so willing to move through the breakdowns into breakthrough impacted your company, your career, your finances?
Everything. It's transcended everything in my life. A lot of different people say it in the personal development space, but you don't understand its accuracy till you start applying it and seeing it, that you will never achieve anything greater than the lowest standard you're willing to let someone else subject you to. Right? You're only as good as what you'll tolerate. Right? So stop tolerating the bullshit. And it's funny how you'll see the bullshit start falling away. Right? I wasn't willing to tolerate being unhappy anymore. I wasn't willing to tolerate the feeling of a tug of war between work and my family. Right? And people will say to me, no, well, you still got kids, you still got work. Yeah, but guess what? Tonight I have the kids. When I'm done with this podcast, I'm out. I went home by like 4 o'clock, 4:30. Right? When I don't have the kids, I'm here in this chair till 6, 7, 8, 9 p.m. if I have to. And I don't have the anxiety of, oh my God, I should be home with the kids. Right? And then because I put in that time that night, if I have the kids the next night, I have no stress at all about checking out at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock to be getting the extra couple of hours with them. And now we've grown. I mean, when I started this practice, started working with you, I was a solo attorney. I think I might have hired, like I said, I hired my first assistant February of 2017. right? Since that time, February of 2017, we're now at 7 employees. Okay, we've bought an office, and we've rented and converted a 4,000 square foot office in Syracuse, in addition to the 5,000 square foot office we have in Utica. We, from 16 to 19, had almost a 300% growth in revenue. December of 2020, we were named the 36th fastest growing law firm in the nation by the Law Firm 500 based on revenue growth from 16 to 19. 2020, when 100-year-old law firms were being put out of business, we posted a 47% growth over 2019. And this year already, we're trending towards another roughly 50% growth over 2020. Because I've got my shit straight.
Because you're a breakthrough, Nick.
Because I've got my priorities straight, starting with what I am and am not willing to tolerate. I think it's that simple. It sounds too simple, but even around here in the office, I've, from a business breakthrough that I've had in the last 18 months is sacking up and having the difficult conversations you have to have, right? For example, here we had a comp structure of one of the employees that was great for that person. It was okay for us, but it was causing a lot of cash crunches. It was hurting us, and it was going to anchor us down from the trajectory of growth I knew that we should and could be having. Was that a comfortable conversation? Was that a comfortable series of conversations that I had to have with this person? Absolutely not. But if I hadn't, we wouldn't be where we are right now, even from 18 months ago, right? We wouldn't be trending where we're trending with the growth on the horizon that we continue to hopefully trend towards and that we will achieve, right? But they ultimately understood. And it was what it was. And I was prepared for a number of different ways for those conversations to conclude and come to various, I was ready for a number of different resolutions that could have come from those conversations. And you have to just be committed, right? And it was just one of those factors, like the status quo that was going to hamstring the growth. And I had to come to terms with the fact that I wasn't willing to tolerate that anymore. I wasn't willing to tolerate having a stressful, cash poor business that was otherwise on paper having the growth that it was having. Right. And that's the thing is you have to get to a point. It's not easy to do. Right. And it's certainly not easy to do if you think you're pretty comfortable with where you are. Right. Because if things aren't that bad, super easy to tolerate things that aren't that bad, right? Like, oh, but we're growing. We were growing 300% over 3 years. Things aren't that bad. No, but could they be better? Yeah. And I was done with it being okay, right? I wanted it to be where I wanted it to be, where my vision said it should be, where my heart said it should be. It's the same thing in personal relationships, right? It's very easy to have a breakthrough when you're slammed at the bottom of the garbage pail and you feel like you have nowhere to go but up, right? Then you start making these changes. I'm going to climb my way out of here. Great, as you should. And I applaud anybody who's done that. I'm not taking away from anyone who's had that type of growth and breakthrough and development. But it's a whole hell of a lot harder to say like, oh, this shit is mediocre. I'm okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's not bad. I'm not going out of business. I shouldn't complain. 100-year-old law firm is going out of business. The firm as it sits now is like, I don't know, in its 4th year, right? Right? Most people be like, shut up, leave good enough alone. I mean, that's not in my nature, right? But it started to become, I was settling. I wasn't complacent, but I was in fear of the change, right? And it finally got to a point in my personal life where I realized that tolerance was affecting my business. It was affecting my relationship with my friends. It was affecting my relationship with my kids, right? It was affecting my relationship with money. It was affecting my relationship with myself, right? I mean, when you get to the point where you're questioning yourself and why you're doing certain things or why you want to do certain things, right? And questioning what's wrong with you. Why do you want to do that? You know that's not what you should be doing. Why do you still find yourself drawn to that? Well, because all these other forces were pushing me in that direction. You know, and I accept the fact I'm not blaming anybody else for the actions I took. I don't want it to come off in that way. I fully own all of my conduct from the beginning of time till now, right? I own it. It was me. And that's gotten me to where I am now. So I'm not blaming anybody else for anything else that's ever happened in my life. My actions were my own 100%, but you start realizing, that tolerance in one aspect of as we were saying, that tolerance in one aspect of your life, you tolerate one person treating you like shit. It's going to be a whole lot easier for you to tolerate that same kind of bullshit in any avenue of your life, in work. Listen, you go home and your spouse shits on you. Then you go to work. You don't think that transcends and it allows for you to tolerate your supervisor or colleague shitting on you at work? Of course it does, because you're used to just taking it, right? It's second nature. It becomes second nature for you to just turn the other cheek and go, yep, that's how it is, right? I mean, and until you come to a point where you say, I'm not tolerating that anymore, even just start in one aspect of your life, and you'll see it transform all the other aspects of your life. Because imagine you don't let your spouse shit on you anymore. Things start changing there, right? The dynamic, the relationship, the respect level start changing. You're going to start carrying yourself a little differently. You're going to have a different internal dialogue. What does that do? When you're at work, someone tries to shit on you, you're going to have more self-confidence to say, you know what, screw you. I'm doing a better job than you are. You want to waste your time running your mouth at me, right? You're going to have a little more chip on your shoulder.
Nick.
And it doesn't have to be a big one, but that's going to start transferring, segment to segment to segment of your life, whether you realize it or not, because it'll have that subconscious change and growth happening within you when you stop tolerating the bullshit.
Well, and I just want to clarify this for our listeners. It isn't about not letting anyone shit on you ever again. It's about when and if that happens, knowing exactly who you're going to be and
absolutely.
having the boundaries, right? And that's one of my favorite things about our work together, Nick, is you've been so responsible for, this is how I'm going to live. This is what I'm letting go of in terms of how I was living. You've decided there's a way you want to live that got so clear that you were unwilling not to create it for yourself. And it's okay when people have different value sets. It's okay when people get to the point where they've taught each other everything there is to teach each other. And then there's the next season. And so I have each guest give homework to the listeners. My suspicion is your homework is don't tolerate. Is there any more to it than that?
Oh, man. I mean, take stock in yourself and what's going around you, right? Because you might be saying, I don't know where I tolerate this stuff. And that's okay, because so at one point I would have sat down and said the same thing. And I probably did. I mean, in hindsight, I'm sure there was plenty of times where I sat down and said, what's wrong? What is going wrong? What can I change to change everything, right? Starting with like my relationship. What can I do to change that? What can I do to improve some aspect of life to then hopefully have that, transfer over to other aspects of life, So it's not always very clear. I'll admit that. You're not all of a sudden going to say, oh, you know what, Nick, you're right. I'm gonna stop letting Joe Blow at work shit on me and treat me poorly. It's not always that easy. But if you take time to just sit down and think, right, about any aspect of your life, that start with something that you know is annoying you right then, right? What is it? What's annoying you? Is it your relationship? Is it your job? Is it your whatever, right? Whatever it may be, just start thinking, lean into that feeling, right? You know, there was a podcast I listened to. I forget the guy's name now. He's from South Africa, and he won like the public speaking world championship. Who knew there was such a thing, right? At like 17. And it was an interview he did, and you know, it always resonated with me, because one of his things that he does in his companies and in his speeches is he'll pull somebody up off stage. So like, okay, what's one thing you've like always wanted to do or be or whatever, right? And they'll say something, and he'll say, okay, why haven't you? And they'll give some excuse. He'll say, okay, you know, your excuse, that's valid, but so what? Right? And then they'll say, he's like, so what? So what's the next? So what? So you want to run a marathon and you lost your from your knee down when you were on active duty. So what? It's not a reason you can't do it. So what? So you can get a prosthetic. So what? And then they come up with another excuse, right? He's like, okay, so what? And he keeps going and keeps going. He goes, and he says like about 6 or 7 so what's later, they get to the root of why this hasn't happened. And it has nothing to do with the first 6 things they mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's like, oh, I have a miserable marriage or whatever. So what? Okay, well, I have kids, so I can't leave. So what? Plenty of people have gotten divorced that have kids. Well, then they come up with another, okay, so what? Well, I don't know where I'd go. Well, so what? You can figure out where you're going to go, right? And if you start doing that, you start realizing there's no real, everyone has excuses. And guess what? They're all valid. They're all valid. I'm not going to sit here and be one of these guys that says, oh, you got an excuse, so what? Shove it up your ass and move on and do something about it. Everyone has excuses, and they're all valid. To that person, that excuse is completely valid, whatever it is, right? Think I didn't have excuses to roll over and play dead, right? I've got 2 kids, and then my 7-week-old is diagnosed with basically terminal cancer. You don't think I had every excuse in the world? You don't think nobody would have blamed me or thought twice if I shut my doors down in my business, sold my house, moved into a shack, lived out of my whatever for my kids to get her through that? Of course they would have. I had license to do whatever I wanted at that point with no consequence. Anybody would have given me a get out of jail free card, basically, right? Like, oh my God, look what you're going through. It doesn't mean that just because we have a valid excuse doesn't mean that we should lean into it and use it as a crutch. There's a big difference, right? Too many times people use an excuse as a crutch. It's a difference. Well, why can't you walk? Well, because I have a bad foot. But then to take that, I have a bad foot and now get on crutches, right? When you could hobble, that's still walking. You're doing the thing. Or you can take this crutch and use that as your whole excuse to not even put any pressure on it, right? And it's extremely true that the most influential and dynamic growth happens when you're the most uncomfortable. And again, I think it's, because that's the easiest time to make the change in most circumstances, right? You get pushed, your back is up against the wall, you got nowhere to go but to push through and do something about it, right? Of course. So that's why that makes sense, right? But again, I would ask people for homework, take inventory in yourself, even when your back's not up against the wall, because there's a lot of important, almost inconsequential at first growth that happens in those moments. If you can take stock in yourself and say, you know what, I shouldn't have put up with that. or this thing is happening too often to me. I don't want it to happen to me anymore. I'm not going to allow it. It sounds so stupid that it's so simple, right? But it's like, you put me onto the book Compound Effect. If anybody hasn't read that, I'd say that's your homework, right? It's great. I try to read it literally every year.
Yep.
But it's that important to renew some of those thoughts and thought processes, right? It's a simple concept. Improve 1% a day. Sounds so stupid and so simple. Like 1%. Like, okay, and I can improve 1% a day. Yeah, then do it, right? Because guess what? In 100 days, you're 100% better than you were.
Nick,
so why not do it? Because no one has the patience. Because in this world of bullshit social media and devices and everything, everyone needs instant gratification, right? I want to snap my fingers and lose my belly. But I want to walk around the block and be able to run a marathon. It's not the way anything happens, right? So you can't expect in a personal development space, in a breakthrough space, in a growth space for that to be any different, right? You're not going to read one book and go to sleep and wake up a transformed human being. Maybe it lights something in you that allows you and ignites you to continue to pursue that growth, and great. But you're not going to sleep with the book under your pillow and osmosis is going to now permeate into you and you're just this guru all of a sudden, right? All of a sudden your business is a 7-figure business overnight, and none of that happens, right? But I think that people still lose sight of the work and the effort. And the thing that I've come to learn is to enjoy the process of that, right? Because it's very rewarding to be able to sit down and just look back any amount of distance, a day, a month, a year, a week, and say, wow, look where I was and look where I am at in any aspect of life, right? You could be like somebody saying, man, I really, really would love to travel, more. And you got all these excuses. And all of a sudden, maybe you sit down and you say, I'm not willing to tolerate the excuses that aren't really real preventing me from traveling. I'm just going to start. I'll start going to the neighboring state, and then I'll start, and then it'll expand from there, right? A year later, you might look back and say, wow, I've been to 40 of the 50 states because I got tired of the BS excuses. I wasn't willing to tolerate it anymore, right? And then from there, you look back a year or two later and you go, wow, I visited 13 countries, right? If that was something in you that you wanted to travel, imagine the satisfaction of sitting there for a moment and looking back, right? I wanted to have a law firm that, I don't even know what it looks like now. I thought years past that I had a vision of what I wanted it to be, and it's evolving, but it's very satisfying to be able to sit and look back and say, wow, 2017, we did this much revenue. And then look now and say, wow, we matched that in the first quarter of 2021. Right? If you told me that at the end of 2017, I'd be like, yeah, okay, that's a good one. I would love it, right? And now I'm like, no, that just happened.
You did it. And thank you for sharing the journey with us. How do people get in touch with you?
Oh, we're on social media. The website is cnytriallaw.com, facebook.com/cnytriallaw, and there's a CNY Trial Law Syracuse for the Syracuse office. That's where you'll find that stuff. But I'm always happy to help. Anybody ever wants to reach out for any type of guidance or talk or just spitball things, I'm always an open book. I love meeting new people and helping wherever I can. So, my email's on there. It's Nick, Nick, @cnytriallaw.com. And feel free to reach out.
Nick, you are an example to all of us. Thank you for sharing your heart, your story, your heartbreak, and the breakthrough journey you took to get where you are today. part of the mission of the Tougher Together Breakthrough podcast is to inspire people to connect to that toughest part of themselves, regardless of circumstances. And you've modeled beautifully what that looks like for everyone today. Thanks for listening to the Tougher Together Breakthrough podcast with me, your host, Rebeccah Silence, and special guest today, Nick Passalacqua. Get ready for the rest of your life.
Thanks for having me.
Please note that the content of this podcast is not meant to be therapeutic or to replace any personal growth work that you are already doing with a coach, therapist, or mentor. Take the content, have it inspire you, and then keep working with your support system. Breakthrough is your right. Breakthrough reminds us that we're tougher together and that we're connected to possibility even in the most challenging and possibly darkest times. I'm Rebeccah Silence, creator of Healing is Possible and proud host of the Tougher Together Breakthrough podcast, where we come together and we tell stories of real breakthrough that exist for you as well. Get ready to break through. Get ready to live more free and get ready to experience more breakthrough because that's your right. Join us on the Life's Tough Media website and stay tuned for more. If you want to get in touch with me, visit RebeccahSilence.com. Your time is now. Your breakthrough begins now.